What is happening, y'all? Cody Plays here, bringing you another Yugioh Master Duel video. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the new ban list that just dropped last night. I'm recording this on August 21st, the day the ban list dropped. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm a little bit late to the party on this. This ban list did drop last night, and everyone, I'm sure, has already seen this list and knows what's going on. But I thought I'd go ahead and make the video anyways to just give some of my thoughts, my first impressions of the list, and what I think is going to happen, going forward. So, without further ado, let's jump right on into it. This list will be implemented on the ladder on August 31st, but of course for the majority of tournaments and leagues and so on and so forth, they will be implemented immediately. So today and tomorrow and this upcoming week, so on and so forth. So, let's jump right into the first change, and that is Nadir Servant going from 2 to 3. So, this is obviously affecting really two decks. It's affecting Branded and it's affecting Dogmatica. But it's really only affecting one deck because Branded is the only super meta relevant one of those two decks. This is very, very good in Branded. At least it's going to be. It's not great in Branded at the moment, but as soon as we get Quim, who I'll actually pull up on screen here. As soon as we get Guiding Quim in Master Duel, Nadir Servant will become very, very powerful. Because what you can do is you can use Nadir Servant to send Titanclad from your deck to the graveyard, which can then summon Quim out onto your field during the end phase, which has a lot of effects that are super relevant for, your plays as Branded, and it's going to allow you to play on your opponent's turn. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot more detail than that, of course, because we don't have Quim yet, and I don't know when we're going to get it. It could be next month, it could be the month after that, it could be the month after that, whatever. But when that happens, this will start to see a decent amount of play in Branded, so just keep your eye out for that. In Dogmatica, it's going to be relevant immediately, even though that deck itself is not super relevant. Excuse me. Moving on to the next thing, we have Ancient Fairy Dragon. So, Ancient Fairy Dragon, of course, got eroded previously, and since it's, come back to being not banned, it sees play in niche decks. It sees play mostly in Spiral. Spiral abuses this more than anything else, searching out cards like Secret Village of the Spellcasters, so on and so forth, to floodgate your opponent. Other decks, I actually did not know Punk was playing it. Only 5% are playing it, so I guess they're really not playing it. But just other certain combo decks can use a card like this to search out field spells to get a lot of value out of them. ABC is quite interesting. The problem is ABC is not too good, sadly. So Ancient Fairy is probably not going to be doing too much when it goes from 1 to 3, but it's here. Yeah, whatever. The next thing is Girsu the Orcus Mech Knight. So, which, funny enough, if I can type, I'm going to pull up Orcust here. Orcust is fully unlimited, which is wild to think about, because this is a deck that just people have feared for so long from their time playing in the TCG, but it's fully unlimited in Master Duel, and there's a few different ways you can play this. You can play it more in a pile variation, where you play it with Phantom Knights, where you play it with, different Dragon Link cards. You play it with other dark engines, so you don't really, suffer the consequences of locking yourself into darks. Play with danger, so on and so forth. But it hasn't really seen too much play, so I hope maybe Girsu going to 3 does help with that. I think having 3 Girsu, 3 Galatea, everything, the deck's not bad. I just don't know what someone's going to do with this deck. If someone's going to take the time to, fully, play Orcust, make a real Orcust deck and play it, and have success with it. I know there are plenty of people out there that play Orcust, but no one's really taking it to the next level, which is quite unfortunate, because I think this deck is very, very cool. If you are interested in an Orcust list, I have a deck profile for an old Orcust list on the channel. Obviously, it doesn't have, Girsu at 3. I don't think Galatea is unlimited either. But, it's a pretty cool one. It's a Phantom Knight Orcust list. It's a lot of fun. I think the deck's really fun. I think the deck's really cool. If you're interested, go check it out. The next thing, which was kind of just spoiled, because I don't know why the website was being a little janky, but we got semi-limits. We have Blaster going from 1 to 2. This is actually kind of relevant right now, which is really, really cool, because the Dragon Rulers have started to see niche play in the past couple weeks. they've been seeing more play in Dragon Link and more play in different rank 7 decks since the Kashtira cards came out. Now, the play in Dragon Link is still very niche. Most people are not playing them in Dragon Link, but it is becoming more and more popular because more people are just wanting to explore, because the meta was getting very, very stale, and people were just exploring with weird stuff, and these were starting to get a little bit more popular. Now, with Kashtira coming into the game, even though Kashtira is extremely underwhelming and extremely underpowered at the current time, because we're still missing a lot of the Kashtira cards, we're missing a lot of stuff here. We're missing like over half the stuff. This really does help because it's more rank 7, level 7 bodies you can just put onto the field almost for free, because all these dragon rulers are very, very free in a lot of situations. There's different armed dragon variations that are playing this. Really, really cool stuff. But how relevant is this going from 1 to 2? I don't know. We'll see. The next thing is Pot of Extravagance going from 3 to 2. I've seen a lot of people going back and forth on whether this is a good thing or not. I don't see a world in which a card that says draw 2 cards and virtually has no downside being a bad thing when there's less copies of it in the format. This card is Pot of Greed for pretty much any control deck, any rogue deck. I'm not going to say rogue, any like control deck, any stun deck. This is a Pot of Greed. We all know how good Pot of Greed is. Now there are downsides, of course, right? You have to do it at the start of your main phase 1. You got to banish some cards from your extra deck. And then for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, you can't draw any cards by card effects. There are downsides to this that Pot of Greed just simply doesn't have. But Pot of Prosperity also has downsides. And that card should not be at 3. It should be at 1 or, banned. I think it should probably be banned, but that's just me. I think that card is way too insane. I think this card should probably be at 1 or banned. I don't think this card should be in the format. This card is way too good. Now, a lot of people disagree with me on that. A lot of people are really upset that this got hit and are saying, well, this is just like, you're just helping combo decks more. Maybe. But I guess my response to that would kind of be, is an unhealthy card, is keeping an unhealthy card in the format like a proper solution to an unhealthy problem? I think there's a lot of unhealthy problems we need to address, and having there's a lot of problems we need to address in Yu-Gi-Oh! And having more unhealthy cards in the format that we acknowledge as problems, just keeping them there, just for the sake of keeping them there, is not solutions to those problems. But that's a whole different video, to be honest. But anyways, enough of my rambling. I think this card is insane, and I also don't think it going to 2 is really going to change much. But I think it should be. I do not think this card should be at 3. The next thing is Luster Pendulum, the Draco Slayer. So this is clearly just because Pendulum Editions and Draco Slayer support came out. This card should probably be at 3. It is not very good. These decks are not very good. The decks are very interesting, but they're not very good, and they're only going to get worse when Kashtira gets their full support, and Kashtira can just start legitimately just picking off your zones one by one. Like whatever they know you're playing, you just pick off your zones. And Pendulum is virtually unplayable. Now, this definitely does help the deck, but I don't think it solves the deck's problems. So, I hope I'm wrong. Anyways, moving on to the limited, we have Branded Fusion going from 2 to 1. So, to be honest with you, I don't really know why they did this. Branded is not doing all that hot right now. Branded is obviously a very good deck. It's obviously a meta-relevant competitive deck. It's probably top 5 deck in the format, but it's not exactly oppressive. It's not exactly, blowing, the doors off the format or anything like that. It hasn't been just oppressively dominating the format for months on end or anything like that, and it continues to get these little hits just thrown at it. And if that continues, Branded is just not going to be the best deck. I personally don't think Branded as a archetype could ever be the best deck in a format, because its best card loses to cards that people play in every single deck. And whenever that happens, just decks like that just really struggle to be the best deck in the format. But specifically with branded, if they keep on hitting the deck when it's like the 5th or the 4th best deck in the format, it's never even going to have an opportunity to be that top deck. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a thing. I personally love branded. I think it's one of my favorite decks in the format. It's one of my favorite decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Just in general, because I think the cards are very cool. But, and frankly, I just don't know what this does, honestly. I don't know. This just only hurts the consistency. It doesn't hurt the power of the deck. It doesn't hurt, like, the inboard power of the deck. This is still highly searchable, but now it is potentially removable. You know, you have a card like DD Crow. You can get rid of it. Your opponent drops a shifter on you on turn 1, on your first turn, and you're like, wait a minute, can I play my Branded Fusion? Because if I play my Branded Fusion, I have to have, Springen's Kit. I have to be able to use Springen's Kit to get it back. That's the only way I can get it back now. Like, is it worth it? Right, so it makes the deck... It just makes the deck worse overall. And I don't know if this deck necessarily needed to be worse, but anyways, again, I'm rambling a lot about this stuff, so we're going to go ahead and move on. The next thing is That Grass Looks Greener, going from 2 to 1, making the variance of drawing this in 60 card even worse than it already was, which frankly is probably not a bad thing. This card is quite degenerate and probably should not exist. I personally love it. I think this card is a lot of fun to play. I think it's a lot of fun to build decks around grass, but it's an incredibly toxic card. It's whenever this card resolves on you, it's basically just, the game's over now, right? There's very few situations where a player resolves grass and does not win the game, right? And those cards are okay. Like, it's okay to have cards like that in formats, but there's almost no downside to it. It's virtually the most free thing in the game if you just happen to draw it. And if you don't draw it, you still get to play 58 other cards, previously because of that too, you play 58 other cards that are all just really good in your deck. And in Master Duel specifically, compared to a format like TCG, playing 60 cards is not inherently bad because there's so many powerful cards in Master Duel that are not in like the TCG format specifically. And I speak on TCG a lot because that's the only other experience I have. I have no experience at all with the OCG metagame. Speaking strictly from a TCG background, like having a card, having like the power level in Master Duel is just so much higher, so you can play 60 card decks and not really feel the same effects that you would in a format like TCG. Anyways, moving on to the next thing. Overall, I'm just going to say, I think this is a good hit. This card should probably be banned. It is quite degenerate and quite stupid. I don't love cards that are basically auto-win buttons, but it is a quite fun one, I will say that. There also is like a decent amount of skill that goes into building a 60-card deck properly. Anyone can throw together a pile and just sack the crap out of people, but it does take, a lot of skill to build a proper 60-card deck that can compete in tournaments and can win tournaments, win in tournament league setting matches, whatever type of a competitive setting you're in. It's a lot harder to do that with 60 cards than just 40. So I don't love the fact that this is going to diminish deck diversity a little bit, but overall I do think it's probably a healthy step for the game to start phasing this out of the meta. The next thing is Kelbeck. It's going from 2 to 1, and this only is going from 2 to 1 because it is an ultra rare. Let's not sugarcoat it. If this was an SR and a Yugioh, spoiler alert, which is banned, if those rarities were reversed and if they were both SRs or they were both URs, Kelbeck would be banned. Because a Yugioh is an SR and Kelbeck is a UR, this card is still alive. They do not want to give you your URCP back, and I really hate that. I love Master Duel because it is free to play. I've spent money on Master Duel once in the entire time Master Duel's existed, and it's only because I got lazy, not because I actually needed to do it. And I just don't like the fact that they are starting to do this a lot more, where they're starting to, not hit stuff because they're URs. Like, we're seeing that a lot now. Specifically, it's kind of hard to say that when there's a UR here, and stuff like that. And like, there's other URs on this list, but we're starting to see it a lot more where Konami is specifically not hitting ultra rares in decks and still killing those decks or hurting those decks a lot because they don't really want to refund people their URCP. But anyways, this card should be banned. Well, it should either be at 1 or should be banned. These cards are broken. They probably should never got printed, but it should be at 1 at the minimum. It should never have been at 2. But anyways, moving on. Sprite Jet going from 2 to 1. This is just another hit for Sprite. I actually think this was a completely unnecessary hit to Sprite. I think what would have been a much more fair and balanced hit would have been Elf going from 3 to 1. I don't want to see Elf get banned because I think Elf is a card. It's a broken card, and it probably should not be in the game because the targeting protection is quite insane. But if Elf is going to be in the game, and we do not want to just completely obliterate Sprite. Like, I know you can play Sprite without Elf because the TCG has done it, but if we want to keep Sprite as a legitimate deck, like a real competitive deck, like pure Sprite, not just like other variations like Runic Sprite and stuff. If we want to keep like pure Sprite, like a legitimate deck, we want to keep Elf in the game, but putting it to 1 like doesn't kill it. You can still play pure. You can play Elf in all the other decks you want to play Elf in. And you don't hurt, like you don't annihilate the consistency of a deck like Sprite, which is already still very consistent. It's still probably going to be consistent enough with 1 Jet. You're just going to play other stuff in it, right? Other variations of Sprite are just going to become more popular. Runic Sprite's going to become more popular. The Furhire Runic Sprite's going to become more popular because of this. All it's doing is going to be shifting what Sprite players are doing slightly. They're just going to be molding their strategy. Tri-Brigade Sprite might actually be popular now because apparently we got Pit Knight early in the game. I hope I spelled that right. And I hope this loads. We do. We have Pit Knight early in the game, so Tri-Sprite is actually a thing now. That might become a lot more popular. And those decks don't necessarily get hit by this because you can get away with 1 Jet. What really gets hit is just pure Sprite. And I think there was another way to hit pure Sprite without really, kind of killing off pure Sprite. And I think that would have been hitting Elf to 1. But like all these other cards, I'm going to stop rambling now and move on to the next thing. We got Swap Prob going from 2 to 1. Same exact thing as Jet. This probably didn't need to happen. Don't really know why it did happen. I don't love Sprite. I don't like Sprite at all, personally. But this really didn't need to happen. This probably could have all been avoided. But whatever. Then the next thing is Forbidden, and we have Rongo going from 3 to 0. We all know this should have happened months ago when, I think that's how you spell it, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow got banned. They banned this initially so that Rongo wouldn't get banned, so they wouldn't have to refund your URCP. And what happened was some of those, the sales ban combo or whatever the heck it is that still just makes Rongo for free was still something people were doing on the ladder. So Rongo didn't go away just because they banned the card that were making it so like Phantom Knights could make Rongo. So Rongo was clearly not as popular as it used to be, like before Gossip Shadow was banned, but it was still running around and just making everyone's life miserable on ladder. So finally, they were just like, you know what, screw it. We're going to get this toxic card out of the game. We're going to refund your URCP, whatever. We're going to admit we made a mistake. We're just going to go from there. Because this card should not be legal. This card never should have been printed. I don't know what they were thinking. This card's ridiculous. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not a game suitable for a card like this. But anyways, that's gone. Nice. The next thing is a Yugioh. We've already talked about this. This card is getting banned because it's an SR, not because it's a UR. And also, this price shouldn't have been banned. It probably should be at 1. I think they should all be at 1. All 4 of them. And if they're all 4 at 1, then decks like Naturia Runic can still play them. Decks like, Adamancipator, RIP, can still play them. Earth decks can play them. Different stuff that gets benefits from milling can still play them. So that's not necessarily tier limits, right? To be fair, though, if tier is still going to be in the format, it's kind of hard to justify having a lot of tiers still in the format and having these. It's very complicated. These cards are very broken. I don't like seeing cards that aren't like oppressive like this getting banned because I mean, I know earlier I kind of said this card should be banned or this card should be at 1, but this card's just stupid. The cards like this that are just mindless value, I think are very stupid. Cards like this that are just mindless value, I think are very stupid. This is not like mindless value, right? It's not just like it can be mindless value, but it's not the same level as something like this, right? This has legitimate negative consequences to it. For using a Shizu Miller effect, there are serious negative consequences to doing that, right? There's no negative consequence to a card like Rongo. There's realistically no negative consequence to a card like Grass. You can say 60 is a negative consequence, but it's really not in Master Duel. You could say there's negative consequences like, oh, I can't draw cards from the rest of the turn. Well, okay, were you really going to be drawing cards the rest of the turn? That's not a thing that happens too frequently anymore, right? So, I don't know. I hope what I'm saying is making sense. I hope you guys are picking up what I'm putting down, but this is not a card that I look at and I'm like, oh, that should be banned. It's a card that I look at and I'm like, it should be at 1 because of the situation that we're in. There's other problems in the format that are bigger than this, right? The next thing is Bish Balkan. It got banned, pretty much the same reason as Rongo. This is just a toxic, stupid FTK card. Just an auto win button. It sucks that cards like this get abused and you can't play them in more like fun, kind of like unique ways. They kind of just make the game miserable. But it's what it is. So whatever. There's really not much to say here. It's banned. The next thing is Block Dragon, and obviously this got banned for 2 reasons. This card got banned because Adamantipator's were abusing it, and it got banned because Super Heavy Samurai will be coming out soon, and it would abuse it. I don't know how I feel about this. I haven't fully finalized my feelings on whether or not I like this ban or not. I was playing in a War League the other day, yesterday, matter of fact, and a teammate of mine is playing Adamantipator, and he started doing Block Dragon shenanigans, and I typed in our group chat, I was like, this card needs to be banned. This card is so stupid. And it is. This card is ridiculous. Then that night it proceeded to get banned, which is funny. But I don't know if I'm happy about this. I'm definitely happy about it because unlike something like the Ishizus, more so like cards like Rongo, cards like Grass, cards like, well, we won't talk about Pot of Extravagance because it's not banned, whatever. Cards like Grass, cards like Rongo and stuff. This thing really has no downside to it. Right? I mean, this thing is like completely it's just free cards. It just prints cards for free. It doesn't have like the same level of downside as a card like Yugioh has. So for all those reasons, I think a card like this should be banned. However, this card also pulls together Earth synergies and Rock synergies so well. And it makes these decks that probably shouldn't exist. And I think that's very, very cool. It does make everything kind of samey by saying all Earth piles are going to have Block Dragon. Right? Whether they're Adamantipator, Super Heavy Samurai, or them combined together. One Super Heavy Samurai comes into the format, of course. It makes them all very samey, which is kind of unfortunate. But it makes it so we can play cards, like niche random cards, like Revival Golem. Like this card is viable because of a card like Block Dragon, right? The Quacky Mirrors, they're viable because Block Dragon exists. The Adamantispators also kind of make them viable because the Adamantispators are just good cards in general. But really, it's because of Block Dragon. And it is kind of unfortunate that we're going to lose out on so many different like versatile ways of playing these random cards that don't really see play outside of this because we're losing this card. And it's not like Rongo or Bish Balkan where it's just objectively game over when it happens. Bish Balkan's literally an FTK, right? Rongo, it's basically an FTK because your opponent can't do anything. This is unbeatable, essentially. Right? there is ways to beat this. You know, there's ways to still win when Adamancipator comes off. It can be very difficult because Adamancipator does kind of pop off, but it's not impossible where something like Bishop Balkan or Rango is. It just completely sucks the fun out of the game. So, I don't know. That's just my I'm throwing around some thoughts about Block Dragon. I haven't fully decided whether I'm happy about this ban or not, but those are just kind of my initial thoughts. I'm kind of leaning towards no, I'm not happy about it, but it is a very, very broken card, and I completely understand why it's banned, and I'm probably not going to be too sad about it, because I don't like playing against Adamancipator, because I'm like, they're going to Block Dragon me, and I'm going to get really salty because they're going to get infinite value off this card, but whatever, right? But, you know, it is kind of sad to see this go. In some capacity, in other capacity, it's kind of good to see it go. So, anyways, now that I've established 0 of my thoughts about this, we'll move on to the last card, and that's Merly. Merly's going from 2 to 0. I think this was an awful hit. Now, this is coming from someone who admittedly is a Tier Limits fan. I think this deck's a lot of fun to play. I think it's a very high skill level deck in a lot of ways. I think it allows for a lot of diversity. I think there's a lot of different ways you can play Tier, which is very cool. Not that that happened necessarily, but that it does, you know, create a lot of ways. You can play this deck in a lot of different ways. You can put this deck into a lot of different things as an engine and make other decks better because these cards are so good. I'm kind of sad to see this go. I think it would have been maybe a little bit more appropriate to limit this to 1. This should not have been at 2. This should have gone to 1 when all the other stuff went to 1. So put this at 1, put Kelbeck at 1, and then put Merly and Havness both at 1. And see what happens. Right? Just see what the meta is looking like. That's going to shift a lot of things because Tier is already struggling with consistency issues. And I know a lot of people aren't going to admit that or not going to say that. People who don't like Tier Limits are not going to be like, no, that deck is still very consistent. It's not consistent. This deck bricks a lot. It whiffs on mills a lot. And that was with 6 fusers. Now that we only have 2 names and only 4 fusers, this deck's going to be, it's virtually, I don't want to say it's unplayable, but in its current iteration, it is unplayable, I think. I think we're going to have to wait for Tier Limits Kashtira to come out and for Kashtira to be kind of at full power for the Tier Kashtira deck to become a thing. And until then, I think this is going to be just an engine. Really. I think Tier Limits are just going to be an engine, which is fine. I mean, Tier Limits being an engine it's okay. I mean, that's what we would be going towards by limiting them all to 1 anyways. Right? But anyways, I'm not a fan of this hit. I don't think it was the proper thing to do. I understand it. I understand it from the standpoint of if you're going to hit one of the names, you do hit Merly. Personally, I think Havness is kind of worse than Merly, just because Havness is like one of the most broken hand traps ever printed. Like, that card is just stupid. But because it's an in-engine card that just enables you so much and gets you so much advantage potentially. But I understand this because this makes Merly gives the deck such a incredible, you know, get out of jail free card with Sprints and Merly as your last ditch effort. So I understand why this one got hit. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. So anyways, that is just my initial thoughts. This video went on a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me ramble. Those are just my initial thoughts on the ban list. I will be doing a tier list video here probably in the next couple days on the new format and talking about what's going on. The meta is going to be changing a lot. So I don't exactly know what's going to be going on with the meta, but I will be doing a tier list here in the next few days. So stay tuned for that. And with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.